to order. Roll call.
Oh, sorry, Gail's here.
Marshall here.
Guzikowski here.
Seifert here.
Segal here.
Alrighty. Approval of minutes from 8/13/24.
Seifert moves to approve the minutes of 8/13/2024.
Marshall second.
Roll call.
Gail, aye.
Marshall, I.
Guzikowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Segal, aye, I guess. There was no discussion. We just went right to a motion.
Very good.
You have anything?
Did you have something to?
We never, there's no motion. All I had.
I did notice that.
I did not notice that. You eagle eyes.
Sorry, I would have mentioned
That's
it
okay.
before we made a motion.
Yeah, so let's make a motion,
Go back,
go back and
open session.
I move to approve the minutes with the change of adding the motion to go back into open session prior to adjournment. Didn't get recorded.
Seifert seconds.
roll call.
Gail, aye.
Marshall, I.
Guzikowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Segal, aye.
I did not catch that.
Okay. Number 4, review common council actions and related public works and capital assets. Got this one.
Yeah, I can run down the list of the last couple council meetings for items germane to the Bob Walker Group. At the 7/16 meeting, we did award the 6th Street sanitary relay project in the amount of $350,145. We also awarded a construction bid for the Fire Station 3 parking lot in the amount of $145,416. And we also awarded the carbon reduction street lighting upgrade project to Gray Bar in the amount of $350. Sanitary relay was a little more expensive. The carbon reduction streetlight upgrade was $350,145. The lion's share of that is a federal grant. So really excited to continue to move incrementally towards upgrading our street lighting to the LED. Did you want to mention the Chapel Hills Park?
Thank you. Matt Trebetuski, Director of Public Works. Just wanted to bring you up to speed that the Chapel Hills Park Rehabilitation Project was awarded as well by the council. That was to Parking Lot Maintenance Incorporated for $223,983.60. And if you recall, that project was to include the rehabilitation of the 2 tennis courts into 1 tennis court and 2 pickleball courts to meet that increasing demand for that activity, as well as taking on the basketball court resurfacing and a number of the sidewalks and paved areas that surround the park. So it should look like a pretty new park once that's all said and done. They do have until June 1st to complete that. And one item that we added in as an alternative that the council approved in that amount was also to replace the backstop at the baseball diamond at the park. And you'll see that today for the 2025 budget, there was $25,000 included for that project. The bid actually came in at $21,000, so it was a favorable outcome to move forward with that, with this lumping that in with this project.
Okay.
Sorry, the 6th Street sanitary relay was awarded to Globe in the amount of $543,460. So much bigger project, but that's the recap from the last 2 meetings.
Okay. Any questions or comments yet? Alrighty. Number 5, consider a motion to authorize the utility engineer to amend the existing professional services agreement with CH2M Hill Engineers Incorporated, not to exceed $75,000.
I'll speak to speak to this one, Chris. The utility staff was unable to make it today. So the utility is looking to extend their professional service agreement with CH2M Hill Engineers, who's Jacob. who has been kind of our on-call retainer engineering firm. Historically, that amount's been $50,000. This is to increase that to $75,000 with the understanding that they're probably going to be on site a lot more often at the water treatment plant, given the significant underground rehab facility projects.
Are those projects identified, or what do they really want to do with this?
No, this is really as issues come up at the water treatment plant
Okay.
that they have a contractual relationship with Jacobs, and they can call them and they can be on site to troubleshoot issues within a reasonable time.
Makes sense to me. Any comments or questions? Motion?
Gail move, sorry. Fred, go for it.
Go ahead.
Gail move to authorize the utility engineer to amend the existing professional services agreement with CH2M Hill Engineers not to exceed $75,000.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Gail, aye.
Marshall, I.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Scully, aye.
Alrighty, number 6, consider a motion to approve a change order, number 2 for PLC replacement project to Next Electric in the amount of $62,378 and extend the contract time by 274 days.
So this one, the utility department's asking for a change order to their PLC or program logic control replacement project in the amount of $62,378 to extend that contract time 274 days. So this project's been ongoing since about 2021, 2022. The program logic controllers, I guess I'd call like the brains of the water treatment plant. It's the interaction with the SCADA that controls the valves and other items, open, close, so on and so forth. I know this has been a very challenging project. Certainly, they've had some delays with getting PLCs. My understanding is that the change order is that some of the models of the PLCs they had aren't compatible with some components at the treatment plant, so they're swapping out models. And then additionally, some of the newer models that were on site waiting to be stored or installed were stored in areas, and some of the metal corroded on those. So the manufacturer recommended replacing that. They did give us a discount to replace those.
I am severely struggling with this because I want to know who put brand new PLCs that we have waited 2 years for in a cabinet that weren't used to corrode before we even put them in. I am struggling with an additional $62,000 for this project and really would like to hear from the water department. I want to know who put them in there. Because if it was us, that's fine. We're going to have to eat it. But understanding the delays for PLCs, this is a struggle for me. If Next Electric put them in there, then it should be their responsibility. So I am looking for more information from the water department unless they gave that to you.
No, I mean, all I have is just from the report, so I can't really speak to who put them in there. It does sound like, at least from what I read, it was our staff that had them stored in there, but my understanding too is that I don't know if some of those PLCs, if that's where they're, was it temporary storage or is that their long-term location? I can't answer that question.
Well,
So can you give a little more background?
Well, PLCs, just in a general sense, have been severely on delay, whether they're from Siemens or PLC or Allen Bradley, because and I don't know what type they're using in this configuration. My guess is it's one of those two. And they've been talking about the SCADA project and the delay on the PLCs, which is widespread throughout the automation industry, and the delays have been severe. So we have new PLCs that have come in, they're put into a cabinet, not installed, and when they go to install them, there's corrosion on them. Now we can't use them, and now we're being asked for more money for them. So again, it goes back to who put them in the cabinet. If it was us, then we're on the hook. If it was Next Electric, then they should be on the hook. And there's not enough information in here to ascertain that. I was hoping that the water department would be here.
So we gotta decide now, do we make a motion to approve or not approve?
Or a hold, or a
We
whole
can
one
hold-
meeting.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean,
Don't wanna-
the information in paragraph 3, I mean, would lead you to believe it was our decision.
Yeah, that's, when I read it,
But, I mean, it is what it is. We can certainly, for as long as these were, we waited for these, we can, one more month of the payment, I'm not sure it's gonna make a big difference to the manufacturer. If we don't feel comfortable authorizing the change, then a hold is the appropriate action.
Whatever.
I would suggest we put it on hold till we get a definite answer.
Unfortunate, because I know we had, I mean, I recall, Mike, these were 6-9 months, maybe more delayed.
you look at Jacob's contract change order, under reason for modifications, number 4. PLC stored by contractor in owner's PLC panels corroded over time.
A little dubious, isn't it?
Yeah. If holding is the elected action, you just make a motion to hold until the October 8th meeting.
Have a date on that, Andrew, or Max? What date?
Next meeting? October.
Yeah, we typically.
October 8th.
October
October 8th.
okay, all right. Gail makes a motion to hold, item 6 until the October 8th meeting of the Board of Public Works.
Marshall, second.
Roll call.
Gail, aye.
Marshall, I.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Scully, aye.
Alrighty. Number 7. Consider into a motion to to approve utility vouchers in the amount of $287,708.88.
I guess I just have a general question. It shows that the utility fuels their vehicles at Quick Trip. Isn't there a tank at DPW?
Yeah, there is a tank at DPW, but historically the utility has utilized Quick Trip, a business account.
Price of gas the same between the two? Or are you getting wholesale rates to fill your tank versus?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can't necessarily, I don't know the ins and outs of it. You know, I know when we purchase our fuel, certainly we don't have to pay the state and federal excise tax and we get reimbursed for that. So I don't know if that's on the Quick Trip business account, how that works, but, you know, certainly one of the things we'll evaluate. I know, we have a larger organizational plan looking at, the utilities and, looking at the DPW operations and, should there be some, economies of scale or, shifting of staff or personnel to the DPW facility, that may be the time to see if they can utilize that fuel station.
It's like PD uses the DPW.
Yeah, I believe the utilities is the only department that does not utilize the DPW facility. And I believe the school district uses that facility as well.
Ask that be looked in, and that's part of your.
Okay.
Well, other
That gonna be in the
questions?
notes, in the minutes that? Francesca, note that Bob did this.
Any other questions or comments?
None.
None?
Good.
Motion.
Seifert moves to approve the utility vouchers in the amount of $287,708.88.
Marshall, second.
Roll call.
Eli,
Marshall, I.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Alrighty, number 8, consider a motion to recommend the common council the various capital improvements.
I'll start this one.
Okay,
Max
Max.
Gagan, Deputy City Administrator and Finance Officer. So I do have a presentation. We'll do an introduction to our 2025 capital improvement program. I'm going to provide some brief background just on city budgeting 101 for the group, kind of understand how this process starts and how we got here. Andrew is then going to talk about the 2025 capital improvement program with assistance from other departmental staff. And then we'll wrap up kind of looking at challenges for the future, really funding availability versus our need for capital investment. So looking at the city budget, what you have in front of you, this is our budget calendar and the annual budget process. So you'll see that it really starts in early to mid-July is when we provide instructions to departments as to how to complete the budget. I provide a preliminary forecast, kind of illustrating where we think the operating and capital budgets will lie. From there, the departments have about 5 weeks to provide their submissions to myself. And then from there, I review them, ask appropriate questions, and kind of put it in a format, kind of figure out where is the budget lying as of this date, where is the capital improvement program lying as of that date. And then in late August and early September, we meet with departments, review their submissions, talk through their operating budgets as well as their capital improvement program item. Then this green item, this mid-September, is when we have our committee meetings, both with either the Personnel and Finance Committee or the Board of Public Works Capital Assets. It's kind of really the first public review process of the submission, both of either personnel items or, in this case, our capital improvement program for next year. Once a recommendation is made by this board, it goes and is distributed to the Common Council. We have workshops in early October, receive the Common Council's feedback. And from there, we prepare all the required public hearing notices, and we have a public hearing at that second meeting in November, ultimately for the budget adoption. And then we get the budget published usually in late December. Again, just an overview of the process, just kind of showing where we're at today, which is the screen timeline, and really the first time that many of this information is becoming public. So one of the things just wanted to provide the board with a little bit of insight onto the operating budget, and the reason for this is that there are interactions between the operating budget and the capital improvement program, and what you'll see is that there's a strategy employed in our 2025 capital improvement program that is specifically related to some of the challenges we're facing with this upcoming operating budget. So looking at the operating budget, and when I say operating budget, I'm talking about our tax levy supported operating budgets. So think about your general fund, which is the city's largest fund that pays for everything from public safety to parks and recreation, community development, engineering, general government, IT, all that good stuff. We also talk about our solid waste fund, which pays for our garbage and recycling contracts. Talk about our emergency medical services, our EMS fund, which is our paramedic services, and then lastly, our consolidated dispatch. So those are really the 4 budgets that make up about 95% of the city's operating budget, if you would. And here I'm just showing you the revenue sources by category. So you'll see that in Wisconsin, most communities are very heavily reliant on property taxes. That's just how municipal finance is structured in the state. So about 64% of our revenues for the operating budget come from taxes, and the primary of those being property taxes. Just for the board's awareness, we do have restrictions on what we can do for property taxes for operations. So you may be aware that we can increase our property taxes for operations only by amounts of net new construction and the percentage increase of net new construction. Essentially what that means is that for all the new value that's constructed in the community divided by the community's total value last year, that's the increase in property taxes we can have to support our ongoing operations, things like personnel, contractual relationships. So, historically, Oak Creek's net new construction hovers around 2% or so. In some more recent years, it was a little bit higher when we had projects like Amazon. But looking at the 2025 budget, it's 2.37%. So actually much better than last year, but still challenging. That your largest revenue source can go up 2.37%. And if you look at that and index it kind of to inflation, we're still trending a little bit below. And then our second largest revenue source is state and local aid. That's primarily through the state shared revenue program. We did have a pretty significant increase in that allotment for last year, which really helped with us balancing our budget in 2024. And moving forward, this amount is indexed to growth in sales tax receipts. That was some of the changes with Wisconsin Act 12 in 2023, and we're projecting that to increase about 2% this year. So when you think about it, 84% of your revenues for your operating budget, we're talking 2.32% increase. So certainly, we'll talk next about the operating budget's expenses and how that's kind of creating some challenges for us. And then you'll see, charges for service make up about 10%. The large portion of that is ambulance transport fee revenue. You'll see commercial revenues at 3%. That's like interest earnings, license and permits at 2%, and all other at 1%. And it's really to say that, when there are changes in some of these other minor categories, they don't really move the needle when we talk about balancing a budget, just because they make up such a small portion of that budget. Looking at operating budget expenditures by category, governments are very human capital intensive organizations. It's not uncommon for 75, 80% of your cost to be 4%. That's just the business we're in, whether it's public safety, whether it's parks and recreation. A lot of it is the people who have to go out there, ensure the public safety, maintain the parks, things of that nature, review building permits, so on and so forth. So you'll see that employee costs make up about 80%, 81% of our operating budget. And looking at our 2025 budget, certainly we're experiencing some budgetary pressures here. One of the things is trying to pay for a fair and equitable cost of living adjustment for our employees. We do have some uncertainty with our collective bargaining agreements with police and fire. Those expire at the year end. So Personnel and Finance Committee is in the process now renegotiating those. We're also seeing challenges with Wisconsin retirement system, specifically rates for protective service employees. So those employees have been retiring earlier and living longer. So if you think about it in a pension system, if you have your employees retiring earlier and living longer, the amount of money they have to pay out has gone up. So the rates for protective service employees for WRS have gone up almost 40% just in the last 3 years. So pretty significant amount there. And then lastly, one of the items Common Council is aware of is looking at our health insurance fund. We've had some challenges the last few years. We're anticipating challenges moving forward. So something we've had to address within this budget as well. Looking at kind of the other categories for our operating budget, you'll see makes up the remaining 20%. You'll see other services. That's more contractual, I guess is what I'd call it. So, the largest item in that bucket is our garbage and recycling contract. And that is due to expire at the end of this year and is up for renewal next year. Based off of the preliminary estimates we've received, we believe this is going to be a pretty significant challenge for us for 2025. Specifically on the recycling side, we're seeing our recycling costs probably increase roughly 45 to 50%. So about $150,000 there. On the garbage side, it's a little bit more stable at probably 3 to 4%. Certainly just challenges in the recycling market and what's accepted these days is really creating pressure there. So that's something we have to be cognizant of and something we're having to absorb within the budget. And lastly, utilities, you'll see it's only 3%, but you know, we've seen We Energies have rate increases over the last 3 years for electric and gas, and those have been about 25%. So you'll see that our electricity costs, specifically things like streetlights, as well as for facilities, have gone up pretty significantly in the last few years just to have to absorb those rate adjustments. So you know, just kind of want to educate the board on where things are at with the operating budget, because again, there is a strategy kind of employed here that's going to help provide budgetary relief on the operating budget side, but it does have impacts on the capital improvement program. So with that, I'll turn it over to City Administrator Vickers, and we'll talk about.
So we have a very large puzzle to put together, and Max just gave you, some indication of, a large part of that puzzle, which is the operating budget. A really significant part of our budget, and really the most policy rich and really forward-thinking multi-year approach, is the capital improvement. So we didn't want to give you just the CIP in a vacuum because it does have larger implications and where we're headed from a financial position and investment standpoint as we move forward. But I did want to at least highlight, generally speaking, a few discussion points and threads that you'll see, and we'll slow down when we go through the individual line items and talk at length about in the CIP. So we've identified really a desire to advance and amplify our stormwater management maintenance, our pond maintenance, our ditching operations, to really help proactively manage stormwater in areas of the community where we have some issues, or just routine and preventive maintenance to make sure that that infrastructure, which we don't always think about stormwater management as an infrastructure unless it's curb and gutter and storm sewer, so that we can continue to stay on top and really get ahead of our stormwater management infrastructure. The stormwater management infrastructure is actually a unique data set because there's also a stormwater management fee that goes along with that, and we can talk about some discussion points about what that level of investment is and what level of fees are required to maintain that investment over time, and we'll talk more and at length about that later. This budget did address some buildings and facility issues. We certainly have items out there that we know we need a plan for, but there's certainly items that with our facilities, our aging facilities, that crop up, whether on a 5-year plan or we're talking about something that happened 6 months ago that we need to address in the upcoming year. A long-term buildings and facilities, really an allocation and an investment annually of building and facility maintenance monies really needs to be discussed as we move forward. We did address some of our most critical needs in the CIP, as you'll see, but we'll also talk about where we fell short and what we need to have a more proactive or more intentional plan about as we move forward, just given the dollar amounts of some of those items. In general, we funded a significant number of requests for vehicles, for equipment, building maintenance items, as I mentioned, but we did so largely with cash reserves. A point I failed to make earlier is if you just wrap up Max's presentation on the operating budget, every community across Wisconsin is giving that presentation. We are very similarly situated because we all in Wisconsin deal with levy limits, and we actually have a little bit of a leg up compared to some other communities because we are growing a little bit. We get a little head start on balancing our budget just because we do have a growth factor. There are other communities, neighboring communities, who have all of these inflationary costs, who have all of these contractual costs, who have minimal to no net new construction. And it's all proportionate, right? I was talking with our colleague a couple years ago in South Milwaukee, and she said, our growth is point whatever %, and I have 18 grand to work with in my operating budget for next still had police and fire contracts, you still have personnel costs and all of those really human intensive operations that we do at local government. All of that on the operating side is really a similar set of facts. We have some unique things with power plant revenue and things where we are really, really unique in what the main message for this budgetary process this year is to really shine a light on our capital improvement plan. We'll talk more at length about this, but we have $1 million for roads. We have $1 million for essentially other. There is no property tax levy support for our capital improvement plan in a community of 40,000, and our capital improvement budget is $2 million for a community of 40,000. So we may not have been as direct in bringing this conversation forward in the last couple years to really understand what the investment tolerance is for the elected officials, but we do want to bring those conversations forward to see what the future looks like for needed maintenance or to invest in new things. So we did fund a number of these requests, all but a couple, largely with cash reserves. You know, we cannot rely on that. This was an intentional strategy. The last couple years, we made a transfer of $2 million from the general fund balance to the capital improvement fund to give us some time for a more long-term plan for how we're going to fund our capital improvement plan. What we're talking about is raising money for our capital improvement plan. And we need to have those conversations beginning with the board and then ultimately with the Common Council making some decisions on where the stormwater fee is and what we want to do with the tax levy to support our capital needs. So while, if you turn to the source of funds, that'll illustrate the point I just made with, we used a lot of cash. We did have to spend down our fund balance. This was an intentional plan, but it does underscore the point of, that's not a sustainable approach. Obviously that cash, this growth, these positive general fund variances every year are not, that we've seen historically, are not going to continue forever. So we need a permanent funding solution for our capital improvement plan. You see the funding sources, that capital project fund was a big one. We have several funds, we have several reserve funds in our capital improvement plan. The two big reserve funds that we have that are not shown here actually went untouched. So we are really using that general fund allocation that we made with a very healthy general fund balance that we needed to spend down. We allocated that to the capital projects fund, and we're funding $1.46 million of these requests with that capital projects fund. Building reserve remains at 1 million, and the equipment and vehicle reserve remains at 1 million. This is what bucket do you take it out of? There was no reason to move things around. It's all the capital project cash. So we do still have that untouched for future years, but we did use a lot of cash in this budget. The stormwater fund is a main discussion point. As you can see, $1 million of cash. We don't have $1 million of cash every year to maintain the level of funding that we project and recommend in this budget. So we'll have to have a conversation about where we want to go with that. The We Energies, the $1 million, and the $1 million is $2 million of capital improvement money that we have had. And we've had that since, I don't know, Ken, Chris, years and years before I got here. So I would say the better part of 15 years, if not longer, our community, our growing community has really relied upon $2 million to meet our needs, along with some borrowing strategies. We'll get into some of that, but really annually as we go forward, $2 million is what we kind of start the day with. We do continue to seek and have been very successful with securing funds from other sources, particularly our federal, state, and local partners. So you see a really nice $750,000 of share there. We do use our EMS fund, which is very healthy, and some park impact fees for those projects that relate to the park improvements. When we go through these individual line items, you'll be able to again see where we are at what was used in this budget in terms of the cash and then where the cash position is in each of those buckets. So, you know, you got to gauge your comfort level with that. But of course, we wouldn't have brought this forward if we weren't comfortable with spending down that cash, but having the conversation of that's not sustainable approach. So with that, I think we want to kind of jump into the individual line items, but I think, Matt, the way we should approach that is if we just talk generally about the stormwater, Matt, let's then go into maybe the two localized neighborhood projects, and then we can talk about, you know, annually what it is we feel we should strive to get to really get on top of that infrastructure maintenance.
Thank you. Matt Sullivan, Assistant City Administrator and City Engineer. As Andrew stated just a moment ago, one of our larger components for the CIP this year will be under our stormwater, one of our largest requests. Over the past year, we've implemented and brought on 2 new employees who, in my eyes, have brought a fresh look into stormwater management, which is a good thing. It's always good to have a different set of eyes and approach. We've also gone through a major new thing with Wisconsin DNR with our MS4 permitting. So we're going under a new permit. Basically, over the last 15 years, we were under a centralized or local permit for just the city of Oak Creek. We are now under a general one, which requires, you know, a broader scale, I guess, or approach. And they've audited us and pointed out a few things as far as inspections, maintenance, items that really need to be addressed more in the future. This was our approach in this budget.
Manages that program?
DNR manages the MS4 permitting. It goes through engineering through us. As far as managing that, we do have assistance through DPW to make sure that we're in compliance with a lot of our
DNR
regulatory.
though.
It's DNR, yes. And every city has one. So every local southeast region city is under an MS4 permitting. So this is not new or different for any community. So as we go through this, we started to identify a number of our needs, and obviously with stormwater maintenance ponds, that's a larger, bigger thing that we've been seeing since the early 2000s as far as induction and being able to manage our stormwater. We have 21 ponds that we manage ourselves, city only. Within that, a lot of that management is vegetative management, inspections, testing water, other odds and ends to that. We've usually assisted by the DPW as far as the mowing and the vegetative management. Obviously, as the city has grown, there's been more strain and requests on the DPW as far as the management of other areas for vegetation. So nobody's fault. It's just the growth of a city. We're losing a little bit of, I guess, we're getting behind, I want to say. So we want to be a little more proactive as far as being able to manage that, allowing our staff from engineering to go down and inspect it a little easier. So one of our bigger requests is obviously with our stormwater maintenance on our ponds. I think that line item sits about $1 million or so, is what, or 250,000 was our best guess first start, and that's more mowing and vegetative management. One of the bigger items that we've noticed, and this was probably brought on by our recent weather that we had this spring, which was one of our highest rainfall totals in, you know, the last decade or two. We continually receive complaints in regards to drainage in ditches and back pitching and water sitting. So we've taken kind of a more proactive look throughout the entire city. We roughly have 65 to 67 miles of rural roadway, which then equates to about 133 miles of ditches that we have to maintain ourselves. Currently, the DPW is on an on-call basis as they replace culverts, or we get requests or complaints. They go out and assist us in their ditching efforts to clean things up. So when they replace a culvert, they'll re-ditch an area from culvert to clean that up and do that management. In the last 4 years, we look back and we're averaging about 2 miles of ditching cleanup with the staff that we currently have. So if you equate that out, that takes us about 65 years to get caught up and reach a ditch, which is unacceptable. We should be doing that every 15 to 20 years to properly manage that. And that's a bigger conveyance of water and cleaning of water A lot of that we do get credits from the DNR, so that's a big item there. Obviously, as we've gone through, and Andrew pointed out, a lot of our money that we do get from other agencies is through our green infrastructure. So we've currently replaced our Abendschein Park. We have permeable pavers at City Hall. PD was a big one where we've been able to replace their entire parking lot within 2 years, permeable asphalt. But that does have maintenance that goes along with it. Permeable asphalt's easier. Pavers look nice, but it's maintenance intensive. Every 5 years, you should be replacing the granite and so forth and maintaining those properly so they effectively work and you get the full life out of them. So it's just more of an investment in maintenance. And obviously historical flooding issues, and this is one of the bigger topics Andrew brought up. We have several areas, and everyone's aware, Oak Creek, we have flooding issues. We've addressed a lot of those. We've done a great job. As we go through projects and there's improvements, we've addressed a lot of the regional flooding issues. But there are some local ones that we have to start addressing. We have 2 of them that are on this CIP this year. One of them is South Hills Estates drainage improvements. If everyone remembers, this is an area down near 27th Street. There are some ditches. There's extensive amount of flooding that occurs in a lot of the backyards. We did receive several pictures and complaints throughout the year. Roadways overtopping, several major issues that need to be addressed. We did actually have our consultant look at this area and just do kind of a rough analysis, real quick one. They were able to identify several areas, and we'd like to move forward on that as far as their design and analysis, and that's one of the line items for $25,000. The other area is our Stonegate drainage channel improvements. This area is just east of Shepherd and south of Pewitz. It's just kind of kitty corner in that area. There's a drainage channel that runs through there. There is a concrete weir or little drop-off area. What has occurred there over the years, water finds its way to the weakest spot and has actually undermined that entire structure itself, creating safety concerns and issues. We currently have that actually area fenced off. We did have our consultant look at 3 different options through there. So we did pick the best one, which was a full removal and regrading of the channel itself to come into compliance. There are some floodplain issues and things through there that we have to manage, but the item they gave us is within our budget of $85,000. That's the design and the construction the following year. So those are some of the big line items. As far as the ditching requests, that is probably the biggest one. That's $500,000. So Ashley and Andrew actually looked at historical costs for grading, seeding those, and in order to get about 3 to 5 miles, roughly, it's about $500,000. That was our initial request. Now, this obviously is an ongoing thing that we'll have to look at in the future as far as dealing how we're going to fund this. There's a number of ways I think we've looked at administrative wise on how we can manage that, and we'll probably have a further discussion with that with the board here. But those are kind of the items within stormwater. Be able to answer any questions.
So, with the exception of debt service that we pay for basically our largest, most recent buildings, as I mentioned earlier, the capital improvement budget does not have any additional or annual tax levy support. Discussion point and decision point for us. We also operate our stormwater management utility on one of probably the lowest 5 of all of our peer communities, for sure. We are extraordinarily low. And that's $39 per unit, equivalent residential unit.
Correct.
And that is like a single family home based on the lion's share of
Andrew or Max, or do you guys have any, your general, how many ERUs we have in the city?
30,000?
Perspective how inflexible that can be. Like the onesies and twosie dollar stuff that we've done historically is not overly impactful.
Given the given the investment need, we're really trying to identify, and this is just the start, right? This is the start of the conversation. You may say, we want a year, this should be 250, we can fund this with cash, and then we can determine with some more time what that management fee needs to be to do all of it as we identify what all of it is. It's probably not all of it, right? And no, I don't know that any government ever meets fully its need, because that's so subjective. However, when you look at the fact that we have a relatively low stormwater management fee, we have a lot of need, and we have a capital improvement budget that has zero property tax levy on a kind of an annual ongoing basis to fund new requests each year. We've hamstrung our ability to stay on top of this stuff. And that's the conversation we're bringing forward. There's a tolerance that we'll have to arrive at throughout this process about what additional funds should be and what you're comfortable with. That's really what we're bringing to the fore in this budget process.
I have a question for Matt. Have we talked to our surrounding communities about their stormwater? I look at the fact that the river, for example, comes through Franklin and then comes into Oak Creek, and it does overflow at times. And I'm just thinking that, you know, they're increasing their growth, and there's more stormwater that's created, and where does that water go from the surrounding communities? Does that come into Oak Creek? And
So, I mean, in regards to management of stormwater, everyone within Milwaukee County and the surrounding areas falls under MMSD Chapter 13 regulations, period. They have to do stormwater management. Anything new has to do stormwater. So they should be managing their own systems and their own water. So there should be really no increase in the additional stormwater that reaches different areas like Root River or Oak Creek. We should be managing that properly. That's if they're following the regulations. I can't control that. We ourselves within a city actually have more stringent requirements than MMSD does. So our stormwater tends to be a little bit more requirements. So we manage it a little bit better within the city itself. I know as far as stormwater fees, if you speak more towards that, Franklin does not have one, which is strange to me. But a lot of the other surrounding communities like South Milwaukee is $80 to $90, closer to 90. Cudahy, which doesn't actually manage most of their stormwater, is I think equivalent or pretty close. But if you start looking at communities that's comparable, they're near 150.
Speaking of Fred's concern though, Sewer PAC probably regionally has the oversight authority there.
MMSD actually has the oversight of stormwater. Yes, everything that we do, they actually review all of our stormwater management reports.
So they're doing it regionally though too.
Yeah.
So why do you have a stormwater fee? And you might have a longer history on that, but they started becoming very popular. I don't know if they were enabled by the legislature or something in the early 2000s when a lot of these MS4 requirements came down. Why do communities charge a special fee for their stormwater management? Well, especially since 2009, every community has been operating under levy limits, and there was no rational way that you could meet those requirements or just do the things that you elect to do locally without having a special charge that's kind of above and beyond and outside of the property tax levy, I should say. So we are not unique in that we have a stormwater management fee. It's just really, really low. And we're not unique in that we have we are unique though in that we have a capital improvement budget that doesn't have a levy component to it every year, and or B, that does not have a borrowing strategy for capital needs. And
I wonder if
we'll
that
talk a little bit more
2009
about
year
that.
made a difference, because that's the last year I believe we actually levied.
Okay.
That whole, maybe that law change maybe mandated or made the decision making on behalf of the council at that time.
You know,
Maybe that's
or
why.
the tradition of the messaging with the mitigation funds and the power plant expansion and things, you know, maybe that was the commitment at that time that
Or my
this will
time,
really
yeah.
help all of the things we need to do. And, you know, over the last 15 years, of course, it's not all the things we need to do anymore. So the fee, you want to talk to that one, Max? Give you an idea.
So just looking at long-term cash flow for the stormwater fund, you'll kind of see, looking at the left side, you'll see kind of 2023 actuals. And our estimates, you'll see that we ended last year with about a $1.1 million fund balance. That's projected to increase to about 1.4 million for this year. You can see, we had about $225,000 worth of capital investment. If we were to proceed with the CIP as recommended, we would be utilizing $1 million for that funding. You'll see that does deplete the cash reserve to about 600,000. And if we're to continue that level of investment long term, you can see kind of how that's a structural deficit and what challenges that would create, projecting out through 2033. And that's why, it's imperative that if we want to continue this level of investment, we're going to have to make an adjustment to the stormwater fee. To get this to balance outright, the fee would need to be approximately 75 to $80.
So with that, do you want to talk a little bit about the localized drainage issues that are kind of specific line item requests, or do you want to just kind of have a conversation about all of the above here on stormwater management and give some feedback on that?
Well, the two we kind of went over the two.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
giving them the opportunity to speak to those questions.
Talk a little bit more about, you mentioned stormwater fees in local communities were lower. Can you talk a little bit more to what other communities are around us?
We have that data. We have a really nice compilation from the Wisconsin APWA chapter, but it's from 2021. So that gives all of the utilities, or most, any they could find. There's several dozen. We fared relatively, not even relatively. We're at the very low end of that, probably the low 10%. And we can definitely provide that. I know Francesca did some research on just our local peer and Milwaukee County community. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, I recently reached out to all of the treasurers in Milwaukee County to get their most recent stormwater fees, so I do have that compiled in a table if the board is interested in any particular community. Otherwise, I can just send out the table to the board. I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, so there's an average amongst the county is about $102. Without the high and low, we're sitting at about $96 for the stormwater fee. We are the second lowest.
Well, Franklin doesn't have one.
Franklin doesn't have one, and Hills Corners comes in at about $25, and we're sitting at $39.
Francesca, if you can just pick a couple of.
Sure. So Cudahy's sitting at an even $100. Greendale is at $88.20. Greenfield, $83.68. Let's see here. St. Francis is at $48 even. South Milwaukee's at $107.40. And let's just say West Dallas is at $82.32.
Max, sorry, you have a feel for, what that generates?
So I guess the way I look at it, we have about 30,000 ERUs. So every dollar increase to the ERU generates $30,000.
9?
We're currently at $39. To be able to fund this long term, we need to be closer to probably $75 to $80 as well.
Decision points are, if that's something you find valuable and wish to invest in, what does that timeline look like? Is it kind of death by 1,000 paper cuts and we're revisiting this every year? We've employed a little bit of that strategy with the last few years of handling a stormwater equipment and vehicle reserve. I think it was $2 or $2.50 we did for a period of years in a row. That's probably okay for the trucks, but it's not going to be okay for the actual infrastructure.
Remind me, where does this show up in the water utility bill or the property tax bill?
Tax bill.
I'm assuming this would mostly be, it's mostly manpower, right? It's staff.
Well, we're looking to contract the ditch. We think we'd be more effective at this point. Staffing itself, DPW is already taxed.
Well, that's where I was going.
Yeah,
next.
so, I mean, in order to properly maintain, we would probably have to bring on an entirely new crew, equipment, anywhere from 3 to 4 new staff.
But I've seen that whole process. Better equipment. Highly inefficient.
So you would have to bring on new equipment. You'd also have to find a place where we're going to take the soil. And this is not something that you can just dump on the side somewhere. So there are other means and methods that we would have to invest in to ensure that that would happen. You know, this is our best estimate at trying to get 5 miles done. Contracting it out, you get the highest and lowest bidders, lowest bidders, but you get the highest quality per se on the market at this point.
So to rephrase, just so I understand, is this a combination of additional public works staff and contracts, or is this just contracts?
This would just be contracts
Just
for this year.
contracts.
Well,
Well,
to be clear, we're requesting additional money for contracts, but the contracted services will amplify that which the DPW does
What they currently.
already.
So we wouldn't be removing them from their current requirements and their.
No, but you're not increasing,
Well, we
you
would-
wouldn't need to increase staff.
That is our intention, is not to increase the staff at this point. Now, if that is something that we, council and board feels necessary for us to look into further, always an exercise that can be done.
What we do right now, we need to do more of. What we currently do, we would like to make the operations a little more smoother. As Ken suggested, we have a request in here for an implement that will help with that. So we want them to do more and be at least more efficient at what they do with some equipment. We're not looking at adding to the DPW workload of, hey, you take another 2 miles on top of the 2 miles you do, and we'll supplement that with contracted services. We want to do what we do, a little more of it and a little more efficiently, a little more proactively. But then really, I think the big strides are going to be gained when we can let a contract for a wide swath, in a formulated plan for, hopefully in the end, 5 miles of ditch work and then the associated stormwater management, pond management as well.
I know that really doesn't address their,
The 500,000 does not address that. The 250 is where we'd be able to do our vegetative management around our ponds and then start identifying when we would need to do that type of work. Those would have to be larger projects. That soil itself,
worry about or measure the volume? of
we
ponds and where
currently,
versus
we
their
currently
plan?
have, it's struggled to get in to be able to even see. And that's part of it, is proper vegetative management. That is doing some herbicide treatments, that is controlling vegetation, so you can proactively look in your ponds and make sure that you do have that storage volume. That is to remove the suspended solids as the water enters. It slows it down and allows it to precipitate out.
We do this
Well,
facility?
this is the bigger picture item, so we'd like to be able to control what we do first. Going in and making private entities do it when we don't properly or have the ability to do it. So this is just as one step in the process. We want to make sure that we manage ours. We do have things in place as far as how we're going to start approaching the private sector.
And I'll just say right now too, even with things in place, our stormwater management agreement, whatever that's technically called, that we approve for all those new developments, those are the best step that we can take. But communities still struggle with compliance with that over time. It is not an easy, it's not a voluntary thing where people are jumping up and down in an HOA, as you know. So, those things go defunct, and then it's who's responsible 10 years from now when something needs to be done, not unique to the city of Oak Creek. And communities struggle with that every day.
Does the MS4 permit have a schedule for how often you need to manage your ponds?
Currently, per the MS4, we are required to inspect the ponds 3 times a year.
And what about removal of sediments and things like that?
What's that? I'm sorry.
Removal of the sedimentation, is that just based on an as-need with your inspections, or is there a minimum time frame that that's required also?
No, so we go through the maintenance of it. We put together a report, and then that report is then handed over to DPW on things that they're able to maintain and fix for us.
Okay, but the permit doesn't require you on every 7 years or so?
No.
I think a lot of that, Bob, would be based on your inspections and what you see.
As needed?
As needed, that is
Okay.
correct.
Good note, bad note. I mean, we have the ability to go forward with the cash position we're in to do this. I would argue, we had a debate among the staff, I would argue that, we should be implementing a stormwater, if there is an end goal that the elected officials have in mind for where their tolerance is for where they want to be, we should start now. If that's 1 year, 2 years, or 10 years, let us know. Not necessarily right now, but that's really the direction we would be seeking. But I do think if we're going in that direction, there's no need to wait a year. And what I'm gathering, or what I'm hoping for maybe as outside of the budget process or not, let's have a really good education on what our ditching process is like with the board. Let's really take a look at where the ponds are. You probably don't even know where these ponds are in your districts. We can get a map of our stormwater ponds, maybe some current photos, and just provide a better education as we move forward. Again, that can be outside of the budget process. I don't think that is show-stopping by any means, but I think it would be really helpful.
Oh, I think it would help with the explanation when somebody asks about it. My stormwater management fee went up $50. What am I getting out of that as far as a constituent would ask? I think that's a good narrative. I understand that, but, being,
You flood last year? We hope you don't next year.
I mean, historically, even in the time I've been around, it's shocking the water problems we used to have.
or did they just move to a different place?
Hopefully they move downstream. I mean, that's what's supposed to happen.
A lot of it's proactive through your stormwater management. That's why we have the ponds.
We had some really, we have a really good reputation for the regional stormwater management, and Matt made that distinction early on. The regional side of things, Phil was great at that. I think it's really getting into the localized issues and the precise management of, for the ponds for sure, is really what we're pinning down to in terms of where the need is now. And there are probably a handful of other localized neighborhood concerns that we have. Maybe they're not flooding issues per se, but they have the potential to be, or have certainly been noticed in the past.
Like the map.
No, we'll put one together and get it for you. Yep.
And Ashley, do you guys have like a pacer system that you're gonna use for the
I don't, there's not like a Pazer system. There is a checklist that you go down as you're inspecting our ponds. We have our engineering tech 2, and our environmental specialist actually are very well educated recently in this. More so our engineering tech 2, who did this for 20 plus years in Indiana. So he is the one that's probably primarily brought on a lot of these thought processes and our changes in how we approach things, which once again is a good thing. We're being more proactive. Yes, there's not an actual scale, not like we use.
Just
That honestly, that what has been driving
Yeah.
the issue in the last probably few decades. DPW has been very reactive to it, and we work very seamlessly together between our two departments to make sure that we get that work done. There's a lot more out there that
Other item I guess just to note, so Oak Creek is fairly flat too, right? So I mean, a lot of the stuff, when you've got ditches that are at 1% to 0.5%, and then they start to fill in over time, over years, it just compounds the issue and makes it even worse, and people just aren't a fan of seeing standing water in their ditch, and I don't blame them. So a lot of them are case by case, which has just been very eye-opening to us going out to some of these areas, and it isn't localized. It tends to be an entire subdivision where you're seeing half of these culverts are silted in.
landscaping.
Yeah, I mean, the entire process will be a challenge in itself. People have reacted or done things on their own, but that's one of those
HOA, I was literally using that checklist. I just printed off a new one because our HOA actually still does it. We inspect both ponds every year. We just never, have-
The only one.
we've never known who to submit it to, so.
I'll take it anytime.
I
And
think I
really,
had the
you know,
last 5
considering
years.
we're largely suburban, I mean, I know the whole 33 square miles and all that is unique, but for 100, you know, seeing 133 miles of ditching was eye-opening for me. I mean, that's a lot.
It's all down Oakwood, all down Elm,
Mhm.
all down Forest Hill.
Just, you know, it's one thing you can look at just the fee, but the fee doesn't tell the whole story, because you also have to evaluate your community and what your stormwater needs are. And I thought Matt brought up a great point. I mean, we have so many ditches that we need to actively manage, whereas if you go to a city like the city of Cudahy, they probably don't have a single ditch in their community. They have an $80 fee that they still utilize, and it's probably more for curb and gutter replacement, because that's conveying it into the system. But you know, that's where I hesitate to say, well, we need a fee that's like this community or that community or this other community, because our needs are very different. You know, Oak Creek and Franklin have very different needs from a stormwater management perspective than City of Milwaukee, St. Francis, Cudahy, South Milwaukee, because they're largely don't have ditches or stormwater management ponds. It's all conveyed through curb and gutters.
I know Cudahy recently has been doing some projects for phosphorus removal, where they've been putting in permeable pavement with like iron filing galleries or something to remove phosphorus. There's a couple alleys, and I think the city hall parking lot they've done that way. Is there any need for phosphorus removal of stormwater here?
Not that we've been aware of.
Okay.
I haven't been aware of that in 19 years, nor has it been
Okay.
a subject brought up.
Cudahy did, I know they did two projects, one in the city hall parking lot and one in an alley right behind Layton Avenue, like Layton and Packard. And they were set up with some special media in the gallery beneath the alley and the permeable pavers for phosphorus removal. I don't know why, but just wondering if that's something we also needed to look at.
Definitely will reach out to our DNR contacts and see what their opinion is.
So knowing we have a little bit more work to do and conversation to have, might I suggest that is the board comfortable with baking in the two localized issues that Matt has identified and moving forward with those, you know, kind of as stated, and then we can continue with the elected officials and the board to have those conversations about kind of that other 750,000, you know, that can be something less next year, that could be something more in 2 years if the need is identified. But I think that's really the discretion you have if you're solid on the fact that we need those other contracted projects to go forward.
Sure.
I just think that if we have a problem, we should take care of it now and don't drag it on for another year or two. So if there is a fee and requirement, then I think we should do it.
I just have a specific question regarding South Hills. It looks like that is like upgradient of the new heyday. If I'm looking at this right. And I know the problems at South Hills are probably a lot longer term, but is there, in your engineering review of new developments, I know you're looking at the stormwater control on their site, but is there also a component where you're looking at how it may affect upstream, you know, natural drainage? And all of a sudden, you know, they put a new development on there, where maybe they're raising the grade a little bit, and it affects the natural drainage, which now affects upstream.
Yeah, we take into consideration any water that passes through. So
Okay.
if there are drainage needs that go through there, they're treated, you know, it's identified, it's treated. Sometimes they actually treat it in their stormwater ponds, or they have to convey it through at the same rate that it would have done before. So yeah, we do look at regionally how it enters the site and how it leaves the site. So that negatively shouldn't impact anything upstream. It should actually be more of a positive impact on our
Just from the standpoint of, you know, you got the developer fees and everything else, and if they're actually maybe not causing but worsening some of these situations, you know, maybe some of those fees then should be addressed that way rather than through the taxpayers who.
I think when you look at the South Hills itself, most of that water is conveyed just south of the 8A development. It actually doesn't run through.
Thing to specify, I know we were talking about the rate, and it is technically on your property tax bill, but, you know, it is a utility, so it's really a ratepayer, so, you see nonprofits, school districts, churches, were paying for this as well. So, just wanted to make that clear, and I think that's why ultimately stormwater management and stormwater utilities were kind of separated out from your property tax levy, because there's a lot of other parties who contributed to stormwater issues that aren't taxpayers.
They get sent a bill for that since they don't have it?
So the new stormwater pond that was built on Shepherd there, soccer field, does the school district manage that, or do you guys manage that?
School district.
I'm still interested to see the 21 ponds.
Andrew, Max, is the plan to go through all these individually, or move along then?
Yeah, so we would like to kind of, I guess all of the items in blue are recurring items. With only one pretty significant deviation, you've seen those. So I think we can skip over a lot of that unless you have specific questions on those recurring items. With the exception of, we'll go down to the police fleet vehicle conversation, because that's new. That's new in 25. The other thing I should mention is, although it's a recurring item, we have $1 million of revenue and we have $1 million of road expenses. We might as well have the same conversation we just had about our roads. That is not an adequate level of investment in road network for the size of a community. So we're trying to just bring forward some conversations. It's a longer term play, but you know, we've been in this now for a period of time on this 1 million other 1 million roads, and you know, that's going to we want to take a little more proactive approach because it's only getting more expensive to get back on top.
2012.
It's kind of what I thought.
The allocation was made in, 2010, I think when we did the $3 million bond, so 300,000 of that for 10 years was used for that bond payment. So it was like 660,000, I think is what
Wait, that's
Annually
when
put
you're
in.
doubling up every 2 years.
so every 2 years because we wanted the project, but recently paid off and we're back to,
Well, maybe just to end on that, since it is $1 million, talk about the process for the annual roads and when, those decisions will come back before the board.
yeah, so we're actually currently reviewing our roads as is right now with $1 million. Our design engineer, Andrew Ledger, has gone through a process of one I requested him to identify projects on the basis of how we have been doing it, dealing with our arterial roads, major corridor roads, and trying to basically extend the dollar out a little bit farther. More of a maintenance feature of roads that are rated 5s and 6s, which are generally speaking, that's our average. We sit around a 6, 5 or 6 on average. In order to maintain our system currently at that level, we're looking at probably a $2.75 million bill annually in order to maintain the system we have currently right now at the level we have. So that right there is a bigger, I guess, a bigger item that council and the board needs to deal with in the future here. But as we go through it, we've been requested to look at subdivisions, kind of doing a different approach and managing more of our subdivision roads because obviously they've been kind of not the priority because they're less traveled. But as we go through that process, we'll be providing that within October. Meeting will be bringing forward the actual roads, different alternatives. But we wanted to look and give the board itself and the council several options to look at versus just one primarily. But each one will fully fund out our $1 million and change that we have left over from the projects we've been successful in doing things very efficiently. So we've been able to move some money around here and there and roll some over. So Andrew will be providing probably anywhere from 2 to 3 different options and alternatives for the board to be reviewing within the next month or so. Outside of that, we're struggling. We do request that we get more, but that's going to be a decision moving forward. Obviously, this is not a maintainable situation we're in. A lot of our roads themselves were built in the 80s. So they're 40 years at age. They're already probably pretty close to done with their useful life within the next 10 years. And that's a full replacement. So that number will increase if we don't start managing them in a bit more proactive way.
We're going to find a way to make this meeting a little more positive by the end of it. But I
mean,
will also say, and we'll go back to, find me a community, stay within Wisconsin, who says, we cash fund all of our roads on a 25-year replacement. Doesn't exist. So these needs are unmet in local government in Wisconsin. It's just the way it is. So we'll put a plan in place and we'll talk about what those investments need to look like and where the source of funds come from. We kind of put roads on the back burner. We're really focused in, not on the back burner, but really the conversation is more about growing resources in our capital fund for stormwater management this year, but just wanted to give you that in total. So do you just want to run through yours, Matt, since you've had the mic, and then we can get to some of the other department directors, and then we'll certainly have a conversation about how that police fleet vehicle thing kind of all fits into this too.
Sure. So a lot of our items are pretty reoccurring, I guess, within engineering. So as you see, our roads and our bridge replacement funds, we are requesting 15. No, we should be good on all of our requests that we've had as far as bridge replacements and projects we've been funded through the last couple of years. So we're good with a lot of those. I think our biggest ask that we have, we've discussed obviously, was within our UPR, or the railroad crossings. Obviously, everyone's pretty well aware of a lot of our railroad crossings that we have we've been managing and we've been trying to update them as such. We have a request on Elm Road, total cost of 200,000. That was based on what we've spent or what we've been projected at some of our other ones that we've dealt with, primarily Pewes Road and Oakwood. Some challenges. 75,000 of that is through the stormwater fee, and that is primarily for the drainage under the railroad. We have to maintain that and do a lot of coordination and effort and work. So that's estimated to be around 75 with 125 to actually do the crossing itself. That's one of our larger asks. I'd be happy to answer any questions on that as we go through this. We do have the police department parking lot. This will be doing the balance of it, completing that. We did get Green Solutions, so you'll see that 400 and some odd $1,000 is through the Green Solutions. We're asking for 30,000 for non-participating items on that. Those are pretty general, little small items, sidewalks, things of that nature that don't fall under the project. I think one of our larger ones here too are the Rawson Avenue street lighting and sidewalk replacement in Milwaukee County. Be doing Rawson Avenue from 13th Street to Howell Avenue, 2025. That project actually, they'll be putting out the bid within the next few months, I believe. So that is a full replacement of our street lighting system. So we have to relocate most of our street lights, all new bases. We're trying to utilize as many of the poles and other standards that we can. But I think we want to bring that up, the LEDs and whole new wire. So that's an extensive project in itself. And then any improvements that we needed on sidewalk that is not participating. That's a $325,000 estimate.
The Liberty and Pewes Roundabout, and we're moving to construction on
I
that thing.
suppose
I'm
that's a
super
pretty big
excited about it.
Yeah, that's a pretty large one. This one has been talked about for a few years here. 13th Street with Milwaukee County should be wrapping their project up this year. So an opportune time for us to manage our major intersection that seems to be a kind of a traffic issue or nightmare. Wood Creek and Pewes Road, which is just south of here. That project is the roundabout. Our estimated cost is 1.5 million on that. That price has obviously gone up just slightly. That's inflation on that and management of that. We're working on our real estate right now in order to make sure our utilities are relocated, facilitate the project. But our project for that is intended to be done through June, July, and August. You'll have some efficiencies, but there is some cost that's always associated with a full shutdown. But there'll be some efficiencies within being able to get that done within 3 months. But that's a major corridor, major use for school and buses. So we want to make sure that we're in there and out in 3 months with the funding on that. We've identified through KID 11. I think our expenditure is.
The only other point on the Union Pacific Railroad crossings, you probably read in the narrative, we really have addressed, I think, 5 out of the 6 or 6 out of the 7, Matt. We have one more at Old Ryan Road, and it's nasty. I took a spill in an Uber, and wings ended up in laps. No, somewhat recently. But it's, we struggled with that. We debated including that, considering we're using our cash for that. It was a struggle to understand really how imperative that is given its traffic at this point. I know it was heavily detoured for this project, but we may bring that back. We'll have a conversation with the other elected folks too. Is that a priority to just get that done and be done with all those, or
Not safe.
is Old Ryan different at this point?
It's a natural.
The launching point. It really is.
Anybody?
I don't. Thank you for looking at the drainage issues in the subdivision in South Hills, and also lanes, or with the roads, so.
We, in that grouping, we will bring back conversation about where the ponds are, and maybe a checklist of what typically things need to be done in those ponds and when. And then we'll bring, what does a typical ditch project look like if we're plotting it out? It involves X, Y, and Z, 1, 2, 3. An education for the board in October.
Like some information also on like the herbicide, how to keep that down. Just if you're adding that in. How do you treat it once you fix it?
Given that, I,
Historically, we've mowed. That's been our management, but it's been taken over by invasive species and other items that need to be addressed.
We bring fire up?
Yes,
All right.
please.
Morning, board members. Mike Kresick, Fire Chief. Real quick overview of our items going into this budgetary cycle. The largest expenditures would be related to apparatus replacements, an ambulance and an engine. We're asking for an ambulance replacement for a 2018 Braun ambulance, currently at 128,000 miles. Obviously, our ambulances are our highest mileage vehicles. We're also asking for an engine replacement for a 2006 Pierce unit. Our oldest apparatus are 2003, which is currently on order, 2006, and then a 2009. After that, there's a jump to a 2018 engine. So our ask this year is for replacement for that 2006 Pierce. We're also asking for a replacement for our battalion chief vehicle, Chevy Tahoe 2015 year, approximately 86,000 miles. It's a very specialized unit in our organization. At the 10-year mark, we're asking for a replacement. Of note for those three apparatus and two apparatus in one vehicle, it's the turnaround times. As you recall, back as part of the 23 budget, we asked for a replacement and were granted a replacement for an engine and a truck. Both of those were at a 36 to 39 month turnaround. That's currently still on pace. That hasn't gone any longer. It certainly hasn't gone any shorter. When we are looking at the engine replacement, current build times for Pierce apparatus are in the 46 to 48 month range. So we're not seeing any relief in the industry, so we think it's important to stay ahead on those apparatus replacements. The Braun ambulance is very similar. We don't anticipate the delivery of our previously ordered ambulance until next spring, so you're probably in a 24 to 30 month window for ambulances on that cycle. Maybe the positive news is the battalion chief vehicle. It's a Chevy Tahoe. But still, with the fleet services and then the build out of the rig for radios, lighting, and then internal modifications, you're probably a year. So we are still wrestling with turnaround times on apparatus, and what we're looking at is to try to maintain, at least to get ahead of those purchases and maintain our fleet the best we can as we wait on those deliveries. Some of our equipment replacement asks also relate to a ATV replacement. 2003 Gator, which was essentially just a utility vehicle purchase for us. No modifications were made to that. It is used for deployments in areas that require a significant amount of walking or off-road rescues. So a somewhat limited application, but still very necessary when they occur. It needs to be trailered to a scene. It's just a utility cart, essentially. So at this point in its life cycle, we're asking for a replacement for more of a utility type vehicle that allows us the flexibility to respond to a scene without being necessarily trailered there. More safety features for those that would be on that utility vehicle, as well as some lighting and some radio components. So it's not only an equipment upgrade, it's a safety upgrade in terms of the vehicle and the deployment. As you're aware from the Common Council meeting, the SCBA grant, we did receive that award. And one of our asks is the additional funding to provide the non-frontline equipment, our spare SCBA equipment, and then the copay amount through that grant. Our annual turnout gear is included in there. That's a rotating CIP. Not too much to talk about that. That was increased to $40,000, I believe, during the last budget cycle, really in an effort to stay with the ongoing costs associated with turnout gear and our increased staffing. Some of the facility modifications include the Station 3 apparatus bay roof replacement. Station will be 25 years old next year. That is a shingled roof. We already had replaced part of Station 3's roof. This is in place as we get closer to next year to work in conjunction with Dick Kolka, evaluate the condition, and be prepared to replace that roof before there's a larger failure of the system. We're also asking for funding for a Plymovent upgrade. As you know, the Plymovent system is our vehicle exhaust system for diesel fumes. Keeps the diesel fumes out of the apparatus bay, out of the living areas of the station. We're using original Plymovent systems, which are basically an inflatable bladder on a vehicle exhaust. And that typically is the point of failure in that system, and that's our recurring cost, is the replacement of the bladders and that air system. We're asking to go to a magnetic system. Fewer moving parts, better reliability, just an overall improvement in the system. And there is also a technology update included for the Emergency Operations Center at City Hall, and that CIP I wrote through the Emergency Management Program. Basically, what we've noticed over the last several years is that though there are monitors in the room, that's the extent of the technology for that space. With this CIP, it would give us the flexibility to create more of a useful room for meetings, not only when the EOC is activated, but for also other departments that utilize that space, including health, fire, LLT has occurred in that space before. So certainly it improves the functionality of that room by allowing video conferencing capabilities, better use of your own personal equipment to transmit programs and presentations on the board. Just kind of maybe takes where it was when it was initially built and maybe some of the thoughts of where it should go and kind of finishes that. If you've been in the room, you know it's just a series of monitors right now with really limited functionality. It's time to upgrade that and make that a functional space. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? The chief.
I just had a question about the ATV. Could you take the old one and modify it to bring it up, or how often do you use the ATV?
So the ATV, it's a limited use vehicle, and what we're finding is the applicability for it is now off-road events, and then events where you might have a large crowd and you need to tool around in an area where apparatus don't necessarily reach. The biggest application I can give you is down by the lakefront. The two incidents, the last incident that occurred at Bender Park, that ATV was utilized to help not only get equipment to and from a bluff area, but also to eventually move a patient that was brought up the bluff out to awaiting ambulances. There was no way to get vehicles back there. The ATV was a relatively basic John Deere Gator. So the modifications to it, we're kind of dealing with old tech and old vehicle. I don't know that it would be entirely cost effective to go that route, or really would result in anything
Mike, are you looking at
useful.
doing like a street ready kind
It would be pretty street ready. It would be a more
of
modern.
car-like versus?
Well, it would be
Like-
somewhere between the two. You know, so our quotes put us in the $60,000 range for a utility vehicle that allows road capabilities, also being outfitted with the safety items for the occupants, with some modifications made for the fire service, the ability to have mounted equipment as opposed to loose equipment, and then certainly maybe the option to have a mounting capability for a stretcher or at least a skid for a patient. So it would eliminate the need to be trailered to a location and be more road ready. Does that answer your question?
On that, Fred, you look puzzled or troubled or what?
I'm just curious because I know what an ATV does. I have one. It's nice to have a new one, but, you know, there's just so much you can do with it. So much use for it. I'm just looking at the city of how often do you use it? What do you use it for?
Well, this is a UTV, right? So UTV and the ATV are two different, yeah.
And I agree. But I'm just looking at, you know, what do I actually do with it? How often do I use it? You know, am I only using it half a dozen times a year? Or do I use it, you know, 50, 60 times a year?
I believe with it becoming something that you could put on the road instead of being trailered, we could use it more often.
Right, that's the reason, that's why it's such a
Well,
dilemma
I'm-
right
I'm
now,
just
because that's to
asking the
trailer
question.
everything.
And I think that's an excellent question. I'm going to tell you from the fire chief's perspective, first and foremost, I hope I never have to use it because it's responding to problems in our community. It will be a limited use vehicle. Certainly the applications for an off-road response in our community are decreasing to where they were back in the day, but certainly it still is, when needed, a necessary vehicle. Our biggest exposure right now for off-road incidents is along the lake bank. So you can run that from We Energies north to almost MMSD. Very limited access in that area, including limited access off 32. Just to use the example, one of our access points is off Oakwood Road down to the end of the lakefront. There's no way to get an ambulance to that location. There's no way to really facilitate the movement of equipment to that location. You need utility-type vehicles to do that. So to give you an accurate number of responses on a year, I think when you talk somewhere around a dozen, you're probably very close to what that reality is, depending on how we deploy. But it's an essential item that when you need it, there isn't a whole lot of things we have that can substitute for it.
I'm even thinking about uses for like the parade, the 4th of July. Now that it's roadworthy, it's smaller, you could get, you know what I mean? You could get it into more places for an event like that as well.
Absolutely. And one thing I didn't touch on with this is the non-emergency uses for the vehicle. Like most of our vehicles, it's just not the emergency responses, it's our day-to-day activities. Things we do on PR or training events increases the functionality of what can be hauled to scenes, personnel to scenes, items like that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Jackson, Andrew, I don't remember. The $1,150,000 for the funding as a debt issuance on the engine, is that our typical, or is that what we have planned to do for this? Funded through debt, or?
Yeah, I mean, so we kind of did this back in our 2023 CIP. We had an engine we purchased. Then it was and we said it would be a future debt issuance. We'd have to figure it out because the lead times are so long. You know, we got 4 years to figure out when and how to fund it. But
So that is the plan all along.
yeah, I mean, certainly if it's a future debt issuance, but if we realize surpluses in the EMS fund, is there cash on hand in 4 years to pay for it? We'll evaluate it. Further down the road, it's really just the authorization to get these apparatus ordered, just given the lead times, knowing that this one's replacing a 2006, we're not going to have it until 2028.
That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
E?
Good morning or afternoon. Tom Kramer, IT Director. This year we are requesting for 3 different CIPs. Our first ones are typical equipment replacement schedule for computers and servers. Next year, we're looking to do all 3 fire stations, DPW, and library computers. Our other CIP, we are looking to request money for our phase 2 of our network upgrade. So this year we did our network core. Next year we're looking to replace 40 plus switches among all these city buildings. These will be replaced pretty much as soon as we can. We're hitting our 10-year span on our current switches, which is the expected lifespan for them. So we're looking to replace those before they start going out. And then our last request is for a sandbox, not a fun one, but this is going to be for testing digital files to see if they are malicious or not. Right now we're using a free service that's no longer available. It was transferred to another program through CISA. However, we're trying to find a product where we can keep these files locally and we're not submitting files with PII up to the cloud, just for security purposes. And that is kind of a summary of our 3 requests here. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? None.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Library, Jill.
So I'm Jill Lininger. I'm the library director. And for those of you who were here when we built the building, you may remember that we added RFID equipment to the building in order to manage the increased capacity that we knew we were going to see, while having to minimally increase our staff. That has been very effective, and we have become very reliant on our RFID technology. Unfortunately, like all technology, it is starting to reach its end of life. We have 4 pieces of equipment that perform our RFID services. We have 3 self-checks, 2 of which are 13 years old, one of which has already reached its end of life and has been recycled. So we need to replace both of those. We have 2 security gates that were installed. One was installed actually at the old building and was moved over, and the other one was installed here. So we need to replace those. We have what we call our staff work pad stations. It's the small pads that are at each of the staff areas that we use to check the books in and out when we have the patron interactions. And then finally, we have what's called our automated materials sorter, or our automated materials handler. We call it a sorter. It's the big piece of equipment where you return your books. We have been told by our vendor that they will no longer offer us service contracts as of May of 2026 because the parts that are available to fix the gates, the pads, and the sorter are no longer available. So my request is to replace all of that RFID equipment before they reach their end of life and before the service contracts end. I am meeting with the library board this evening. As I said, the self-checks need to be replaced pretty immediately. So I'm asking the library board to use some of our surplus funds to replace those self-checks. I am coming for the CIP to replace the sorter and the security gates, which are the bigger ticket items. Any questions?
We have to retag all the books.
No, we don't have to retag it. It's literally the equipment to just read the tags.
Okay.
Oh, I'm good, Goose. Thank you, Jill.
Andrew asked if I can just briefly touch on the library's accumulated surplus. So, as you may or may not be aware, libraries and library boards are, say, quasi-governmental entities a little bit. They're part of the city, but they have their own rules and regulations, their own autonomy. So, with a library, any dollars that go unspent in their budget have to be retained by the library for certain uses. So, what this library accumulated surplus account is dollars from their operating budget that are unspent have to be transferred over to this segregated account, and then the library board sees fit. So when we were looking at this project and how significant it was, we really worked with Jill to figure out how much of the accumulated surplus can we spend down, knowing that it's I think a couple $100,000 right now. So that's kind of what the accumulated surplus is. If you have questions, let me know. But essentially, it's a segregated account where any surpluses from their operating budget are held over by state statute.
That's controlled by the library board, correct?
Correct.
And they're willing to spend that to upgrade.
Correct.
this.
That's what we're gonna talk about tonight is to use money from that fund to, fund to just be able to replace the self-checks on the staff workstations now. There's not enough money in the fund to pay for the handler and the gates.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maintenance, we gonna talk about anything with maintenance or move on to police?
Will, at least that first one, at some length.
Thank you, Matt Sullivan, Assistant City Administrator, City Engineer. So the first and probably the biggest ask that we have for maintenance is the Civic Center masonry and window flashing repairs. This project was funded with $80,000, I believe it was last year or 2023, that budget. This is to deal with some of the issues that we've been faced with, primarily for the window flashings and some of the windows that we have on first floor that are leaking. And what we found is there was an exploratory thing done outside with Dick Kolka and engineer in regards to finding out what the issues were. Primarily trying to figure out why we were having some leaking and flashing around our windows. So during that exploratory investigation, we found that on the edges of our flashing, there was not like a return dam. So sometimes when you have most of your flashing, it's pretty flat along the top of your windows. What we were finding is that the water was working its way along the flashing and then back in. So a lot of times, and this is just, I think, general. Some people practice it, some people don't. It's not that it's wrong or that it's not right, but sometimes they'll put like a dam on the edges that prevents that from happening. So one of our bigger issues was trying to manage that. So we actually did put out a project that had several identified areas or unit prices for windows, and then as you're entering some of the areas within our facility here, there's actually all 4 entrances. You'll notice that there's rusting happening along some of our railings. Some of our capping stones on our walls are starting to fall apart. The mortar, just maintenance things that just probably were not the best practices for installation or construction purposes. That's not the fault of architects or anything along those lines. This is just something that maybe a little better best practice might not have been done in certain areas. But we wanted to address a lot of these. These are more aesthetics, and as you let these things progress longer, they're going to start failing, and then it becomes more than an aesthetic issue. It starts becoming structural and other integrities and things along the lines that could create some issues as far as safety. So our ask was for $625,000. We approximately have $70,000 in there. We understand that not knowing the full scope of the work for the masonry, our ask is now is that correct? What this would do is I think this will allow us to identify the areas that are most in need, bid those out, get a good understanding of what those requirements will be to actually do it the right way. Primarily, if you look on the east side of our structure in the entrance off of 6th Street, that is probably our worst side for masonry. You go out there and just take a look, see some of the walls are actually falling off. So what our project will actually do is it'll address that, it'll address the coping, we'll be taking off and properly installing the railings so you don't have water sitting next to it, you don't have the corrosion, you don't have the failure within that steel. And then we'd be repainting all of the railings and that and getting it to be more aesthetic pleasing, structurally sound with those. And then we'd probably be looking at trying to replace the 4 windows that are leaking more reactive in the future or proactive in the future. But what we should be doing is addressing the issues we have now that we know of. I think this brings up a larger picture. And we've been talking about that, and I think this has been a discussion on the board, it's been a discussion with the council internal, as far as programming maintenance for our facilities. We have several facilities that we manage here, and one of my major tasks has been to work with Dick Kolka and understand the scope of a lot of those issues. Obviously, we have bigger issues with the PD and their heating. We have potential build-outs in the future for our consolidation with water, sewer, and PW. We have maintenance of this building. We have maintenance of fire stations. Chief Cressa came up and talked about re-roofing. So we've been kind of addressing this in a more proactive way this year. We have found a company that is going to do a full envelope analysis over on the PD to give us a programmed out future 5-10 years of what we can expect for maintenance, whether that's mechanical, windows, internal, external, just to get a better understanding to provide that to not only internally for our management of it, but also to the boards and councils so we can start doing those sinking funds for maintenance. One of our bigger assets outside of the people, but obviously our facilities. So programming that properly, this is a good message, getting in front of it, understanding it. That's one of the things that I've been tasked with, that Kolka's tasked with. I think this is just one of those steps in the approach here. So our first task is obviously to start taking care of one of our bigger assets, which is the Civic Center. I'd be happy to answer any questions on that item.
Yeah, we kind of piloted that approach with the PD to kind of see if we could extrapolate that out to all of our buildings and facilities. But what that also provides is a download of institutional knowledge from Dick. So we have that all in one place. We don't have to, rely upon some of those details that only the staff knows about if those staff aren't there anymore. So we'll have a pretty good picture of the mechanical X is 10 years old, the useful life is 8. You need to do that in the next year or two, whatever the case may be. So we may build upon that pilot with that building assessment that we ordered.
Absolutely. I think that Andrew makes a good point. This is a good pilot project. We know the issues that are there. Let's address them there, get an understanding there. And then if it is a successful one, get the information that we're looking for, obviously implement that throughout our other facilities.
So the request was actually, the need is actually $625,000. Again, funding that with cash is a problem. Like we can't, we're at a comfort level now where we've used cash to the degree that we felt comfortable with using cash. And you'll see why as we bring this all together with the last couple of slides. There's more to consider here about other investments in the community, kind of positive ones, kind of nice to haves, not necessarily maintenance. I wanted Matt to continue to go forward with addressing the most critical needs with this $100,000. We need to find a way to wrap that additional $500-ish thousand dollars to get this building where it needs to be. Maybe as part of a larger project, a combination of projects, a borrowing, in order to be able to do that.
So it appears the scope that you bid was to fix the problem of water intrusion.
So yes, our original scope that we bid was to deal, it was in several different items, so a lot of it was to deal with every entrance for all of our coping on our fascia. It was also, we split out the windows, so we had the east side, we had windows per unit price, we had windows and things. We were trying to get a good idea what it cost, because obviously we haven't dove into this. So we had 4 bids. We have a pretty good handle on what that cost is. We also have some very experienced contractors that came in to look at it. That's all they do.
Does any of the cost include repairs for damaged items because of the water
The window flashing itself, that whole thing took apart the window itself, the drywall, the interior, the insulation, everything that dealt with the window itself. So it would deal with that water intrusion at that specific location.
By putting this off, we continue to cause damage or potential damage or worsen damage inside the building, the longer we hold off on
That is correct. So that's why we want to manage the four that we are aware of, that we are actually have the water intrusion now. And
See
then,
it because it's-
yeah, you see it in the drywall, you see it in the paint peeling, and you see it. And then we want to address some of the masonry so we get a full understanding of what that scope is, and then how that is perceived and managed a little better.
on any exploratory on ones that don't show evidence of
No,
leaking, to see if they are?
we did not. Looking at the plans in itself, everything is kind of constructed, and it's weird because it's actually leaking on the east side and the north side, which I would imagine
Right.
the south and the west would be our ones. Now, that's not to say that there wasn't different contractor or different crew on site that they actually did, crank it up a little bit on the side and did the side dam. We don't know that. The ones that we did explore didn't have them. It's all a preference on construction. It's not a requirement, but guys could be looking at it going, hey, we know that this is a better way of doing it. It doesn't take much. It's depending on
Any other questions on
questions
this?
on that item. I guess then we'll talk about the next item that we have is the fire station number 3 sprinkling system replacement. So this building was built in the early 2000s, or back in that era, and then what they had back in 95 and 2000 through that time, that decade, there was, I don't know, I want to call it soft steel, not good steel. But the products we're finding throughout the area and implementation is there is a weaker steel, so there's been some corrosion within those systems. So this system that they have for their sprinkler system is a dry system. It's in the roof. So what it does is it's just air. So once it's implemented, there's smoke, water is released through a valve, it goes into the whole main, and then the sprinkling system ejects this water. So when it shuts off, they get the water out, and then sometimes water does sit in there. There's moisture and different things like that from heating, cooling. But what we are starting to experience is pinholes, different holes within the main line of the sprinkling system, which is then leaking. Water goes on or something, it leaks in, and it's causing damage throughout the area. So the system itself has been turned off, so they actually do not have protection as far as fire. Currently, this ask would actually,
Except for the guys that are there.
except for the guys there, but as far as speaking to it more, but this would replace the main portion of all of their fire protection within the sprinkler system, get that system back up, including some replacement of drywall.
For clarity, the dry system is shut down. The wet portion, there's two sprinkler systems within the building. The dry system, which is subject to freezing, which is why it's dry. Then the wet system, which is in the living area. The bay area, the apparatus bay, which you could extrapolate as the most prone to maybe having a fire, is the dry system and is currently out of service. The living area of the fire station, the wet system, is still in service. Yes.
But with fire trucks being 4 years out, that could be a huge problem.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Well, I'm gonna just open the door and grab it out. They're there all the time. One would think we could deal with that.
Any other questions on maintenance?
No.
I'm good with that response time would be pretty good on that call.
Please. Please. You guys got anything?
Good morning.
David.
Morning, Chief.
David Stecker, Chief of Police. I think for ease of going through it, I apologize. We're gonna start with the first one and then I'm gonna kind of jump around because it may be easier to explain as we go through. So, body armor replacements, we are required every year to replace a section of our personnel's body armor. Body armor is only good for 5 years, and depending on when people get hired, new hires, and how long they may stay. This year is actually one of our bigger ones where we're anticipating 17 people next year. It's about $1,000 now for body armor over those 5 years. So we do put in every single year as part of a federal body armor vest grant. It's never guaranteed, but if we do win that, we get half of it replaced up to them. But we do ask for everything to be funded up front. And if we do have surplus on that, we have in prior years come back and then not asked at a certain point because we've built up a surplus that can take care of that. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on the body armor CIP. Okay, I'm going to jump to the bottom to the TASER unit replacements because this is another recurring one. As of a couple years ago, TASER has gone to a different model of getting information out and getting the logistical needs that we need every year to have everyone get trained, and ultimately these items are used, so we have certain items that we need to replace every year and make sure that we have them on hand. That price has gone up a little bit every year, and we're looking at probably total replacement within the next couple years, and that's going to be a little bit more substantial, which is why this was moved over to the CIP aspect a couple years ago. So I'd be happy to answer any questions as it relates to the tasers, the taser units, or the program. All right, I'm going to jump back to the evidence technician van replacement. So we have had a old ambulance for about 10, 15 years. It got replaced. This is our third version of having some sort of vehicle for our evidence techs. So we do have an evidence lab at the police department that is utilized there for processing, doing things there, but we need items out on scene when we go there. So we have had a van, an old ambulance, and now our second old ambulance. The old ambulance that we have is well beyond its years. Its maintenance has become a lot to deal with, and it's a diesel vehicle which needs a lot of upkeep with the air ride suspension that's constantly going in and out on it. So we're looking to get that replaced, and we're doing so with a gasoline vehicle, doing one with a much smaller footprint to be a F-250 van. And the price includes all of the upfitting, not only for the vehicle to have some graphics as well as lights, but also to make sure internally we have the cabinets that we need to have all of our equipment in there and ready to go. I'd be happy to answer any questions that relates to how often we use it, what do we need it for, why do we have it. The ambulance obviously will go back to the fire department because that was one of those traded vehicles, and they'll be able to auction that, and that'll come back to auction money for the city. All good? All right. You guys are making this way too easy. So probably the bigger one, and this is the biggest change, and I can speak to some of it, but I will actually leave it up to Max and Andrew to explain the bigger whys, is this is a fiscal decision to take it out of our operating budget and put it into the capital budget. It's been a part of our operating budget for way longer than I've been at the police department. Actually, I believe it's a little unusual for us to have it in our operating budget when I talk to other agencies as well. So all we're looking to do is take exactly what that amount was requested out and have it in capital budget. The whys and why does that make a better sense for everything and balancing a budget, the professional is over here, so I'll leave that to him. But ultimately, it's articulated in the CIP. We rotate every 3 years through our fleet vehicles. Some of those vehicles are completely beyond any usefulness anymore. The ones that we can get usefulness, we rotate into our other administrative vehicles. So that's how we're able to absorb that and then shift that down, and at least keep us with a good usable fleet. The amount of driving that we do put on these, we cover 28.4 square miles. And when we do have other items that come up that we need to do warrants with other jurisdictions, we need to bring people down to the county jail. We have mental health things that are down near that same area for mental health. There's a lot of miles that end up going on those vehicles. I think I have it in there. It's a little over 150 road miles that we cover. So there's a lot, and everybody wants us in their subdivisions, and in order to do that, we've got to cover a lot of distance. So in that 3 years, we've been putting on between 150 and 170,000 miles on a single vehicle, and that's when they get rotated out.
The wise in the house and the really smart people over here, right?
Yes.
Is that what you said?
Yes.
Probably a first. Yeah, right. So this number one is an incredibly helpful strategy to help balance our general fund, our budget under the levy limit. Number two, I don't know the why beyond what Chief said, that it was even longer than 23 years ago. Is that when you started?
On 26, so it's
26,
it's
sorry.
been 3 decades plus. It's probably been like this since inception.
I always shortchange people. I gotta quit guessing. A long time. I thought maybe it was when the power plant and the funds were created for that. This is a capital asset. This belongs in our capital budget. It's been squeezing our operational budget for many years. We've looked at this. I've asked about this. This is my 7th or 8th budget. So far, we didn't pull the rabbit out of the hat to help with our general fund budget. This year we are, number one, but number two, it's a capital asset. And what we wanted to do is properly categorize that as a capital asset to further the conversation about really the inadequacy of our capital budget. We have a couple slides at the end, and we'll get through DPW and a couple of slides at the end that kind of speak to this a little bit more. But what this does, if you were to add up all of the recurring items, we're at our $1 million. Those are needs. Those are recurring needs. But if we do nothing moving forward in 26 and beyond, we have zero discretion other than those recurring items, or bumping out a recurring item and saying we need to do this instead, unless there is more levy support to the capital improvement budget. So wanted to just pin it down and just, our $1 million is being used for $1 million worth of things that it needs to be used for, but there's no real discretion. Some of these things will fall off, like, the leases for municipal tractors and things, and you'll pick up $100,000 or $200,000 of discretion. But we just wanted to kind of paint the picture fully that you really do have $1 million of capital other needs every year. Just the basics, just the routine, recurring replacements, things like that. We'll get to bring it all together later, I promise.
Any questions for me on the vehicle aspect? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Ready for Public Works?
Sure.
All right.
Sure am.
Thank you.
Worn them down. Good.
Matt Trebatusky, Director of Public Works. I'll kind of maybe just go over some of the newer items, but I can go into any detail on any other ones that are in blue that are kind of recurring items if you wish. But did want to just touch on the enterprise fleet lease program. That has been $200,000 for the last, I want to say, 5 or 6 years. And that initially started out as a smaller pilot program of a handful or so of Public Works vehicles, and turned into, over time, pretty much the full fleet of small and medium-sized vehicles that we have, the trucks. That was about 30 vehicles. Over time, we've been adding some vehicles for inspections, engineering, planning, as well as the fire department. We had added some vehicles last year, if you recall. So just over that course of time, we've been able to increase from 30 to approximately 40 vehicles, but we are looking this year at bumping that up to $225,000 to support the added vehicles that have become part of that program. As far as some of the new items for the year, not reoccurring expenses, there's the swivel attachment for a ditching excavator that was referenced earlier. Just with the amount of ditching that we do a little over 1 mile to 2 miles per year. That's in between when we're doing culvert replacements with that equipment. Currently, we just basically use a bucket with our excavator, which is pretty limited in the angles and movements that it can make, so it is pretty inefficient in the amount of time that we need to the excavator machine itself in relation to the road to avoid traffic. What the swivel allows us to do is really it's able to rotate at a 45-degree angle, or it rotates 360 degrees, but the attachment can make 45-degree angles. So it's a lot more equivalent to you're taking your hand and moving it around to move material, which makes it a lot more efficient and quick. In addition, in replacing the attachments, whether you're going from the bucket to a grapple or another attachment, this can be done basically in seconds or minutes at most, as opposed to having to bring it back into the shop, have a couple mechanics work on it, and physically take one piece off and put the next one on. These pretty much click in place. So this would, by the measures of what we looked at on several different units, likely would increase productivity 20 to 35%. It would use less fuel because we're going to be starting up and stopping the equipment itself and moving it around in the repositioning process. So we've held off on requesting this for a few years, but we have had a change in the crew, and they're really looking at this as being a productivity increase for them, and something that would help out the process. Some of the other items that we've requested. We're looking at the Chapel Hills Park baseball diamond backstop replacement that was talked about earlier. That was something that was awarded with the Chapel Hills tennis and basketball court project for $21,000. And then along those lines, we're looking at doing a similar project with Meadowview Park rehabilitation. Again, looking at where we have 2 tennis courts, converting that to 1 tennis court and 2 pickleball courts. That project's a little less expensive because it doesn't have the basketball court component to it, but we've looking to make that move as we kind of look at the reconstruction of our tennis courts and wanting to do it in a more meaningful way where we're going to get more use out of those courts as we proceed forward. And we'll probably see another park or 2 in the next few years where we'll look to do that same thing. The utility sprayer for the parks is we are requesting $21,000. This is basically a ride behind piece of equipment. Currently what we use is a 5-gallon backpack, and we go around and spray in smaller areas where a larger sprayer is not able to accomplish that task, whether it's ball fields, fence lines, playground equipment, trees, boulevards, those types of areas. Right now you'll see some of the staff going around, they kind of look like a Ghostbuster with the backpack on, and obviously there's more refilling with that. You're walking as opposed to driving something that can go 5-10 miles per hour. And then finally, we're requesting for a chipper replacement. That's about $115,000. Right now we have 3 chippers, one of which is relatively new. We had received a couple of years ago, but for our main operations every other month when we do our branch chipping, we're sending out 2 crews with 2 of those chippers. We have a 3rd chipper that's used primarily for forestry operations. It's a little bit of a smaller unit. So here we're actually looking at replacing that smaller unit just because it isn't as aggressive or can't do as much work as the others, just because it was just a smaller sized spec that was put into place at that point. So those I believe are the new items that aren't reoccurring that we're looking at for 2025. I'd be happy to answer questions on any of those items as well as the ones that we have had in past years.
Yeah, I have a question about the leasing of the trucks. How many trucks do we do a year that we leased or turn over?
We try to do roughly 25% to about a third of the vehicles each year. We probably won't do as many this year or the following year. We're still going to try to keep up a replacement cycle, but with the prices of vehicles going up, the interest rates up, and then really unfortunately rebates and things have gone down, we may not do quite as many for this year as an example, but by and large, we've done about 25 to 33% per year that we're changing through, because that's kind of the sweet spot where it's still retaining the value of the vehicles, especially taking into account the municipal discount that we purchased them for. That's kind of the great spot where we're still going to get a really good return for the sale of those vehicles.
Just got a general funding question. I know we charge for special pickups.
Yes.
Somebody needs to pick up 50. how often are people requesting a special pickup versus the semi-annual drive around where I see people like empty out their entire garage to the side of the street and you've got two crews there that are, half hour loading up trucks. And that's offered for free. And it just, I don't know, it seems like people know that they can either pay $50 or avoid that and just keep it until they've got a pile that, will fill a dump truck.
We could have anywhere from, I would say on average, 0 to 10 in a given week. We pick those up on Fridays for special pickups where we charge. And then obviously, yeah, we get a lot more
Right.
stuff for spring and fall cleanups.
I don't know if it's continuing the free makes sense based on, I mean, it seems, at least where I live, it seems like it's always the same houses that seem to just have an abundance of crap that ends up out on the street twice a year. They never pay for a special pickup. I don't know.
As long as we can direct the calls to you, Bob,
No. I'm a volunteer.
it's never a problem till it's gone.
I'm a volunteer.
$2 drop-off fee we implemented at
Oh.
the recycle yard.
Bob
like
was,
that.
yeah, that was before Bob's time.
Certainly, those are the types of things that more established, maybe built-out communities really have to take a look at whether the value is there to continue providing those. Leaf collection is another one. Shoveling sidewalks is another one. Some of that low-hanging fruit are really the first on the chopping block when it gets real tight. So I think it's very, very valued by the community, just to have the option.
So then out, it makes any sense fiscally. Branch pickups, I mean, recycling yards, plenty available.
Yeah.
We do it anyway.
Want to talk a little bit about the rear, kind of dovetails into the rear. If we could go into that and then tie it all together at the end and get your direction on some things.
Where is it? There
A
was
memo,
page
there was a
somewhere.
memo in the back regarding the unfunded or partially funded items.
Yeah, so we were looking, currently the city owns 2 garbage trucks, one of which is due to be replaced. Well, ideally it would have been replaced already. I believe we ordered it at the end of 2021 as part of the 2022 capital budget. We are hoping that will arrive sometime next week, but we've been kind of holding our breath for quite a while now, going on 3 years. The second garbage truck, though, that is newer than the one to be replaced is 15 years old. The reason we have two of the garbage trucks is we do the spring and fall cleanups, as you know. We do that in about 2 weeks' time, having a couple crews out on each of the garbage trucks. It's ideal to have 2 as well, because if one breaks down, we still have it available for weekly special pickups. It's also used quite extensively at the yard. We use it to basically compact or crush larger items such as couches, furniture, and those types of items that unfortunately the compactors we have on site, the stationary ones that push into roll-off dumpsters, are not able to. There's not a wide enough area for some of those items to get into, so we use the garbage trucks for that purpose. We probably do about 175 or so trips to the landfill each year with those 2 vehicles, so it doesn't sound like a large amount. It's just, I think, the ability and capacity to have those available at the yard for the compacting, and then also to go out for the not only the special pickups 2 times a year, but those weekly special requests. So that item was for $250,000. we were looking, if we were to do that, at this point in time, we would probably look at more of a demo unit that would be available and meet our specifications and readily available as opposed to having to wait 3 years as we have for the one that we had budgeted in 2022. I don't think it's to not fund it this year isn't going to be the end of the world by any means. We'll continue to repair and make sure that it's operational. I'm sure there'll be points in time where obviously one's down, but I don't think it's going to be a detriment by any stretch. Just kind of looking at that point in time where those things get a lot of use and abuse, especially when we are crushing large items. A lot of contractor vehicles, they're not necessarily taking those types of things. They're taking your residential trash and refuse. They're not crushing large pieces of furniture.
Potentially could be part of the waste services contract that who's doing the weekly pickups provides the truck.
Certainly an option. I know that those companies will do that type of thing, whether it's a once-a-month thing that you can put out a larger item, or if you wanted to actually contract to have them go out and set points in the year to do that service. Haven't explored what the cost would be. I know in a prior community I was at, just to help with leaf pickup and pushing those into vehicles, a third of the size, it was $20,000 to $30,000 each year for that service.
But we talked about the Civic Center, and we'll get back to that as one of the final points. But the kitchen remodel for Fire Station 3, I wanted to provide all the staff an opportunity to at least educate us. Those are probably coming back. If not, you determine we're finding a way to make them happen. But of course, with the critical needs just established at the Civic Center, budgeting a kitchen remodel was really, I think, contralogical to that conversation. So that's it. We don't disagree with the need. I mean, it's original to the station. I don't know if Chief Kresick can speak to this, what level of upgrade has gone into it over the years, other than some minor cosmetic stuff. But certainly we're looking for a modernized kitchen.
No, certainly over the last 2 or 3 years at the fire department, we've been exploring the idea of a kitchen remodel at Station 3. Again, a 25-year-old station in 2025. You're talking a 50 to 75-year-old life expectancy on fire stations. We want to modernize that station. We want to make sure it is functional throughout its lifespan, and without a doubt that it provides a area for our crews to rehab and relax post-incident. So we began to explore the options of piecemealing a renovation of the kitchen or doing a full remodel. It's a 24/7 operation. The station is occupied at all times. So piecemealing it would only, I think, create a greater amount of stress and disruption in daily activities. Certainly a larger project, doing a remodel all at once would be much more efficient and maybe more cost effective. Certainly as we began to obtain quotes and talk with Dick Holka, maybe like you, we were a little bit surprised with the cost. It is a commercial kitchen. We're not looking to change the layout of it. It's just replacement of cabinets, countertops, items like that. It will be back. We will bring that item back. Something will need to be done to modernize and upgrade that station, and we'll continue to look at ways to include that in the budget. Thanks. Sorry about that. Any questions based on that?
Up the mic.
Thank you.
Yeah, I walked away there without asking about questions.
So really to bring this all home and encapsulate this and get some direction from the board. Again, we've been talking a lot about availability versus investment need. And with the annual, we have $2 million in our CIP. And essentially if this budget moves forward, all $2 million are allocated annually. They're already allocated out there, earmarked, if you will. The $1 million for roads, we know we need a longer term plan on that. The $1 million for everything else, we have everything else. The $1 million is really accounted for now, especially with that $264,500 for the fleet, DPW fleet. So what we want to have a conversation about is, does the 2026 CIP for other than roads remain at 1 million? And we talk about this or that? Or do we find a way to talk about this and that? The best way I can summarize that in my mind, because the ands or the ors are all needs. The needs here, as other similarly situated places, far outstrip the funding availability. The hypocrisy, and maybe for Fred and Bob, who don't go through the whole budget process with the elected folks, the whole hypocrisy of levy limits is that levy limits encourage borrowing. And you can take an exemption to your levy for the amount of debt service for that project or whatever you would like to call out. So I think a real achievable goal that we'll talk about with the Common Council for 2026 is to increase our CIP funds by 33%. One strategy to do that is to borrow for our road program and exempt that debt service, which results in more burden on the taxpayers in the city of Oak Creek. However, we are kind of back to, we have 1 million for roads. We have then 2 million for others. So we've really made our $2 million CIP 3 million. Probably a good start, a soft start. Seems a little, not unlike the investments we've made in the public safety staffing plan, where we found a comfort level with the elected folks who are going to be accountable to those policy decisions. We found a way and a message and an amount that was tolerable in that regard. Certainly 33% increase is not enough. We just got to look at that over time. So that's a thought, that's a goal my office will put out there. I think that's very achievable. We can still have these conversations on discretionary things that are needed and have this and that as opposed to this or that conversation. Would also like your input on, we know we have a lot more education on the stormwater management plan as we put forward. We wanted to earmark that as a big number because the number's larger than that, really, if we were to do it on a rational basis of, would you say, every 10 to 15 years? The number's bigger than that. But we wanted to put that in there to have a conversation about some direction on what you find to be valuable in terms of those investments and what should the stormwater fee and that tolerance you have for the stormwater fee increase to be, if you want to increase it at all. The last piece is really the Civic Center. If you directed us to find a way to fully fund that $625,000 with the cash position we have in a few of these areas, I think we could find a way to do that if that were your direction. We could put some thoughts together for the Common Council to just kind of finish this chapter of what we know to be some issues with the Civic Center and move forward with a longer, bigger conversation and a bigger project on some of the other facility projects being done at one time under one contract. So, think to the state legislature, if the Common Council were to say borrow for their road program, your $1 million worth of roads gets to cost us 1.2 million. Because they don't allow you to make that decision on your own that you should just raise your levy by $1 million for more roads. You have to borrow money.
The cost for borrowing money now for the city.
It's a loaded question. It really depends on if it's taxable or non-taxable and how it's amortized, but right now a non-taxable rate is probably 4.5%. You amortize that over 10 years, you're talking, and if we level funded it, it's probably 25% a different borrowing, non-taxable borrowing. That's $13 million for refunding some lake fund debt. And level funding that over 20 years is going to cost $20 million. So $7 million.
It's a little expensive to borrow money. If you're gonna borrow that much money over a short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, what you see in many other communities and many communities I've worked for is you hit this natural point where, people used to levy for their capital improvement programs, but as their operating budgets had pressure with levy limits, they take those dollars and they shift them over to the operating budget, and it gets squeezed out. And then you're borrowing every year for capital needs. I mean, I came from a community that borrowed $15 to $20 million a year towards capital budget. That's common. Talk to any other community in the state, and that's what they do. They have to borrow every year for it. We've been very fortunate that we haven't, because we get $5+ million in state aid to fund the power plant. We get $2.25 million in mitigation payments for the entities. 99.9% of communities in the state don't get that. So we've been in this position for years. So I can tell you that in our communities east of us, their debt service exemption is like $6 million. They fund their capital projects annually through borrowing, and taxpayers $6 million in levy to pay for that. But it's at a premium because you have to pay
I think we got you beat up pretty good here today. So we also have in the back of our minds where we have all of these cash positions and this multiple. Well, you know what? I think it does segue nicely, Max. Let's do the final slide because it's important.
Can I ask one additional question though for Matt? You're gonna prepare something for us on the stormwater ponds. Could you also put something together for a full picture of the $625,000 need for the Civic Center repairs?
And I'd also add, doing this exercise, because I've been on council, I think about going on 8 to 10 years. Every year I've been on this committee that has gone through the CIPs. We're woefully short on funds, and so to be able to tell constituents, and we really have some live things in the pipeline that Matt has brought up with some of our constituents, from stormwater to infrastructure. I do feel I would support some type of way to manage that a little better.
So here are some things we do, and I want to, I think, just go to the final slide, Max, if you could, to finalize this, the last one. Yeah. So, we've sat through hours and hours of budget meetings, and it's not unlike any other annual budget cycle. And the departments bring forward and what feels like an enormous amount of problems and issues and personnel shortages and things like that. That's not uncommon. That's what budget time is for. It's a little exhausting though. It's a little daunting, but we're not uniquely positioned. I just want to say thank you to the team for putting full sunshine on all of these issues. Some of them have been issues that haven't been addressed for decades or years. Other things we're a little more current on, and we're really trying to get our hands around some of these issues. We do have, a multi-year budget outlook on this, and I think that'd be great for Max to inform and kind of educate all of us as, we aren't just looking, what's going on next year. We do have a really good outlook on things in terms of our forecasting.
Yeah, so, I prepare multi-year financial forecasts just for the general fund, other operating funds, TIDs, you named it. it's not like we don't see these problems coming. I see the problems coming. I can tell you that next year is going to be a challenge, and the year after that's going to be a challenge. The year after that's going to be a challenge. That's just the reality of how we're structured from a financial perspective in Wisconsin. That we don't have the tools available to us to afford to do and continue the programs and services we have. That's just the reality of it. But at least we know the direction we're heading, and there's ways to mitigate that over time. We have options, and we employ those as we need to. But that's just the reality of how budgets are constructed for municipalities in Wisconsin. I can tell you, yes, Oak Creek has its challenges. Our challenges are 10 times less than 90% of the communities in the state. Having worked for several other in the state, conversations we're having today, I had 10 years ago. So this is not uncommon. The fact that we're still in a growth pattern and we still have net new construction, something I know Andrew mentioned. Our community to the east, their net new construction this year was 0. You know what? The reality is there's going to be a day and time that Oak Creek builds out. Can't say that's 10 years from now, 20, 30, 40 years from now, but the reality is we can't grow land.
Right.
Land gets built out, we're annexed, our boundaries are set. So there is a point in time that naturally is going to come, and we're going to be in similar positions that where those communities are. And that's going to be a challenge. Something doesn't change.
Right.
This then following So really our goal is to develop a multi-year consolidated capital improvement program. So departments put it together. Their own right now, they're kind of individual and separate. It really looks at just what are their expense needs, but it doesn't necessarily look at the revenue side. So that's really one of my goals over the next year to two is be able to have a 5-year capital improvement program in a consolidated manner, because it's going to highlight what is the gap between the current funding sources and the capital investment needs of this community. And forewarn you, you're not talking hundreds of thousands, you're probably talking millions.
Mhm.
And that's where we're going to have some conversations about how do you get there and what are the priorities on some of these very large investments we have to make in the upcoming years.
Good stuff. I think it's impressive. I'm glad you're looking and having the departments do that work, because it just helps us be better informed. So that's a good strategy.
I have a question about how long do we really go with a budget? Do we look at up to 5 years, or we take 1, 2, 3 years at the max?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, capital improvement programs are a minimum of 5 years. Some communities do 10 years. Some even go longer. So, the challenge is working with Matt and his team is really to figure out, what are the life cycles of some of these facilities, the roofs, the mechanicals, all that data is going to have to then be layered into all the other needs of departments as well as desires of the common council, and that's going to essentially get you an understanding of these are the needs, and at least when you do it on a longer term scale, you can have very educated conversations on, is replacing this fire station more or less important than doing this XYZ project. You can shift things around to balance your budget. So if anything, from a capital program, you probably want to stick at least 5 years, if not longer, because then you can make those decisions. And there are some of the capital investments we see, fire stations being one of the lakefront. They don't happen in 1 or 2 years. 3, 5, 7, 10-year investments. But at least having a 5-year plan empowers us to make decisions and realize, oh yeah, instead of all of the departments requesting everything at once in year 4, are there ways you can spread this out between multi-years to level out things like, if we have to borrow money, we want to level out what the debt service payment is, because we want to level out tax burden. You don't want to be moving your projects and your tax burden's doing this. Realistically, you want to plan for it, and if it's a 2% increase is the tolerable, what the council tolerates, we can build that in and figure out it's just 2% a year for debt service increase. So that's kind of why we look at this multi-year instead of a shorter time frame, because we really want to provide consistency in the program instead of just addressing things as needed. And that's kind of where we've been, as we've done big projects as we've needed. We just need to transition to how does this work long term, so we aren't seeing these huge potential property tax spikes if we have to issue debt.
It's a hypothetical question, but do we go back and track how we've done the previous year or two compared to our budget? In other words, how accurate were we when we actually prepared that budget several years ago? And did we actually meet that budget, or was that budget a little low, or was it a little high? How did we actually perform? Now, this is kind of looking backwards, but it does help us to look forward when we do budgets. So, last year, did we come within 2% or 5% of our budget? Were we up or lower? And I was just curious, do we track some of that sometime to see when we do planning, how accurate do we actually come?
Yeah, there's really 2 ways to look at it. On the operating budget, certainly we do that every year. As we close out our fiscal year, we see why is there a variance and why, what's the rationale for it. So that's pretty common. I can tell you, Oak Creek, as well as many other municipalities, these last 3 or 4 years had surpluses. Operating budget surplus significant these last 3 or 4 years, but there's reasons why. Had some one-off items, sale of land at the lakefront, had a large environmental claim. In the past, we had insurance. We got $1.1 million there. We've been very conservative budgeting interest earnings. Interest rates are high right now, but they'll come back down, it looks like. So we do monitor that. On the capital side, we do monitor it. We close out projects as they are done. If there's excess money, we put that into the cash balance, and that's kind of how we're funding some of these things now. The challenge on the capital side is, other than the reoccurring items, those ones basically hit budget. It's the other ones where we think it's going to cost $180,000. Once you get it to final bid and award, it's $200,000. I have to figure out on that additional $20,000, and given that we have the cash reserve, that's been helpful. But on the capital project side, it's a little bit harder to balance and judge that because many of these projects don't start in one year and end in another. So, we have projects in our capital projects fund that were budgeted in 2019 that are still open. So that's just the reality of capital projects is they're multi-year. So it's kind of hard to say how much were we over or under budget when there's projects dating back 5 or 6 years within its budget.
It's nice to track how budgets actually
Absolutely.
go in your capitals and how successful you've been in preparing it. So I'm just looking at that aspect of it.
Yeah, no,
You know,
that's
industry does the same thing. They track everything and they go back what they did the past year and then what they do for the next 5-year budget. They try to track how they do in their performance.
Yep.
So when all said and done, we do have an action item.
Yep.
Can that be done at this point?
Would be whole before.
We held the change order for the
Yeah.
PLC.
We did, but can we recommend inclusion of the various capital improvement plans without looking at the stormwater management additional information and the civic center additional? Okay.
Normally, every year, we just approve
I think globally, I mean, we have what
what's
we,
been
what we need,
presented.
make a recommendation. There's some backs. From a global standpoint, we can make the recommendation. Plan to the common council.
Yeah.
Unless you got anything else.
No, I want to see those two documents.
But in
I
terms
would
of the
see it there,
plan,
too.
we know we know the 3 items that Andrew's not recommended to be included in the plan. We just went over those. Everything else is. We got legwork to do on.
Right. Alrighty, well then, need to make a motion for the number 8 there.
Yeah, we'll move to recommend to the common council include various capital improvement plan items in its 2025 CIP budget.
Marshall,
Charlie seconds.
Roll call.
Gills, aye.
Marshall, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Sigali, aye.
Alright. Administrate, we did that already, didn't we?
The administrative.
Those are the utilities administration and operations reports. So I can't necessarily speak to them.
Notable that I saw.
If you have questions, I'd say, reach out to Mike Sullivan directly.
Okay.
That's just one thing I wanted to ask.
All right. Well, then we can make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
Roll call.
Gil's eye.
Marshall, aye.
Guzekowski.
Seifert, aye.
Segali, aye.